all sorts of places over the world where we were very lucky to have those moments with our mother, and very, very happy memories.
Prince Harry has always spoken lovingly about his late mother, Princess Diana, but few knew just how deep their bond truly is, even after her tragic death in 1997. It may sound unbelievable, but Harry admits that even today, at 40 years old, he never makes an important decision without consulting his mother's spirit. How is that possible? Through a medium, Harry receives messages from the other side, from Diana herself. She continues to care for her son just as she did in life, whispering words of comfort during his most difficult moments. What advice did she give him from beyond the grave? And why did it move Harry to tears? Now you'll finally learn everything hidden from the public for so many years. For Prince Harry, the death of his mother was a blow he never fully recovered from. In August 1997, Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris. Harry was just 12 years old. At the time, he stayed with other royal family members at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. In his memoir, Spare, he recalls that morning in vivid detail. His father woke him early, around 7:30 a.m. Prince Charles sat on the edge of his bed, placed a hand on his knee, and said, "They tried, darling boy, I'm afraid she didn't make it." Harry writes that these words stuck in his mind like darts on a board. But he didn't cry. He was in shock, just 12 years old. There were no hugs from his father, only a second touch to the knee and the words, "It's going to be okay." But as Harry admits, nothing was okay for a long time. After Diana's death, Harry felt like he was floating in a void. Together with William, he stepped outside Kensington Palace to greet mourners. They smiled, they shook hands, the hands that were wet with tears. Only later did Harry realize what was really happening. He had become a sort of middleman for other people's grief. And the guilt stayed with him. People were crying and he couldn't. The farewell to his mother was unbearable. At the funeral watched by an estimated 2.5 billion people, Harry and William walked behind Diana's coffin. He still remembers the silence in the streets, the sound of horses' hooves, the creaking of wheels, and the crunch of gravel underfoot. Everything felt surreal, and yet he didn't cry, not then, not in the years that followed. He kept everything inside. Only once, when her coffin was finally lowered into the ground at the Althorpe estate, did the tears come. That was the first and only time. Throughout his teenage years, he didn't cry again. Instead, he held on to a fragile hope that maybe somehow Diana had survived. Perhaps she was hiding, that one day she would appear again in a blonde wig and dark glasses. Perhaps she will appear this morning, he once thought. But morning after morning came and Diana never returned. The pain never truly faded. It haunted him for years. Panic attacks, overwhelming anxiety, attempts to numb the pain with alcohol and drugs. All of this he described in the book. Even as an adult, Harry was still searching for answers. The years went by, but the wound stayed open. He couldn't let go, and eventually he turned to something most people would never consider. He visited a woman who claimed she could contact the dead. He wanted to know, so was his mother still with him somehow? Could he hear from her just once? Why would he take such a step? Because the emotional trauma he suffered as a child still follows him today, and strangely enough, it seems that even within the royal family, the idea of mediums and the spirit world isn't so far-fetched. It may be hard to believe, but don't forget, Princess Diana herself once consulted psychics. Astrology, tarot cards, and seances aren't typically associated with the British royal family. Royals are expected to be reserved, pragmatic, and deeply rooted in tradition, but Princess Diana had a hidden side, vulnerable, searching, and desperate for comfort. In moments of crisis, when her marriage to Prince Charles collapsed and the pressure of royal life became unbearable, Diana turned to the spiritual realm. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, her diary was filled with appointments, not with officials or diplomats, but with astrologers, clairvoyants, and healers. As Andrew Morton wrote in Diana, her true story, when she first began investigating the possibilities of the spiritual world, Diana was very open, almost too open, to belief. She was so much at sea in her world that she clutched at any prediction, like a drowning man clutches at flotsam. Even a former palace official once described this behavior, according to royal author Sally Bedell Smith, as a cry for help. Her first steps into the world of mysticism came through the suggestion of Prince Andrew and Sarah, Duchess of York. In 1986, as Diana struggled with her failing marriage and emotional turmoil, they referred her to astrologer Penny Thornton. "I just wanted to see," Diana told Thornton, "if there is light at the end of the tunnel." From then on, Diana regularly sought comfort from a variety of spiritual guides: psychic Betty Palco, naturopath Roderick Lane, celebrity clairvoyant Sally Morgan, astrologer Debbie Frank, clairvoyant Vaso Cortizes, medium Rita Rogers, and even homeopathic dowser healer Jack Temple. Although Prince Charles himself was known to be interested in holistic medicine and philosophical ideas, he didn't support Diana's growing spiritual explorations. Morton wrote, "When Charles saw her reading a book called Facing Death while she was on holiday, he asked her bluntly what she was doing, wasting her time reading about all those issues." One of the most influential relationships in this period was with the owners of the San Lorenzo restaurant, Lorenzo and Mara Burney. According to Morton, they had a reputation of an Indian Earth Mother, and they encouraged Diana's growing curiosity about astrology, tarot cards, and other realms of alternative metaphysics such as clairvoyance and hypnotism. It was during this time that she met astrologer Debbie Frank. Morton described her as someone who combines general counseling and analysis concerning the present and the future as they relate to the conjunction of planets appropriate to Diana's birth time and date. Born under the sign of Cancer, Morton continued, Diana has many qualities typical of that sign: protective, tenacious, emotionally attuned, and nurturing. As Diana's confidence grew, her view of these mystical practices shifted. They became less of a lifeline and more of a tool, methods of self-reflection, ways to navigate her inner world. She wasn't just seeking prophecies, she was looking for meaning, for answers. Why was she in so much pain? Why had her life turned out this way? Could her intuition guide her toward peace? Today, it may sound surprising, but Diana's openness to the spiritual world was a defining part of her inner life, and it seems that this part of her legacy didn't die with her, because her son, Prince Harry, grew up carrying that same sensitivity, that same longing for guidance beyond what this world could give. And just like his mother, he too eventually turned to the spirit world to find answers. In the final weeks of her life, Princess Diana once again turned to something that had often helped her cope with anxiety: the world of the spiritual. Alongside Dodi Al-Fayed, she visited Rita Rogers, one of the UK's most well-known psychics. This visit was even depicted in Season 6 of The Crown. Diana and Rita were introduced back in 1994 by a mutual friend. Their first session happened over the phone, and Diana was so intrigued that she wanted to meet in person. Reflecting on their meeting, Rogers later said, "You couldn't pull the wool over Diana's eyes. She could spot a fraud from 20 paces and would have quickly sussed me if I hadn't been genuine." Diana had sharp intuition and a strong sense for truth. She wouldn't have continued if she had sensed dishonesty. Still, despite that critical mind, Diana was going through a period of deep emotional turmoil, and during these years, she increasingly sought comfort in spiritual guidance. Christopher Anderson, author of The King, wrote, "Over the years, Diana went through a revolving door supply of astrologers, faith healers, numerologists, tarot card readers, clairvoyants, psychics, and spiritual advisors. Most of them simply confirmed what she already feared, that her husband was cheating on her with his old flame." Her former bodyguard Ken Worf shared a similar view. He told Tina Brown in the Diana Chronicles, "Diana was in the thrall of all these mad psychics. The inquest into Diana's death acknowledged this aspect of her life. It was noted that her reliance on spiritual advisors brought her a sense of companionship and emotional comfort during a challenging time, but it also fed her paranoia. Diana became obsessed with clairvoyance, including one she privately nicknamed Fergie's Witch Woman, though the woman's identity was never revealed. Patrick Jeffson, Diana's former private secretary who worked with her from 1990 to 1996, was deeply concerned. He said he feared her belief in astrologers and soothsayers. fed the paranoia that never lurked far beneath the surface. According to him, by the time of her famous Panorama interview in 1995, Diana saw plots everywhere, including a belief that someone had taken a pot shot at her with a gun in Hyde Park. Needless to say, I had all the accusations checked out, Jeffson said, but the threats were, as I had known all along, all in her imagination. Even if people around her were skeptical, for Diana these sessions were more than superstition. They were a way to survive in a world full of betrayal, coldness, and isolation. Again and again she turned to these voices for support. What was she truly searching for? Answers no one else would give. Support she couldn't find inside the palace walls. She wanted to know what lay ahead. She wanted to feel she wasn't alone. And perhaps in all her searching she found something that would later guide her son. But that is another story. The British royal family's fascination with spiritualism is far from new. It dates back to the Victorian era. Queen Victoria, who reigned from 1837 to 1901, was, according to occult expert J.H. Brennan in his book Whisperers, The Secret History of the Spirit World, fascinated by spiritualism. Brennan claimed that Victoria not only showed interest but also invited mediums directly to Buckingham Palace and held seances in its grand halls. Even more astonishingly, her personal servant John Brown, with whom she was rumored to have a close relationship, was, according to Brennan, a medium himself. Through him, Victoria is said to have tried to contact the spirit of her beloved late husband, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Like many other episodes connected to the Windsors' secret interest in the spiritual world, this side of royal history remained hidden for decades. However, evidence continues to surface, revealing that the royal household's attempts to connect with the departed were not unusual. According to paranormal historian Richard Felix, Queen Elizabeth II herself participated in a séance in 1953. At the time, she was a newly crowned monarch, grieving the death of her father, King George VI, who had passed away the year before. Reportedly, the séance was attended by her closest family members: her mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, her sister, Princess Margaret, and her husband, Prince Philip. What was said or heard during that session remains unknown, but the fact that it happened speaks volumes. Years later, more stories emerge to support the idea of royal belief in the supernatural. Princess Diana's former butler once claimed that the late royal haunted his mansion in Cheshire, and added that the late Queen Elizabeth II also believed in the supernatural. This contradicts the popular image of the royal family as purely rational, grounded in protocol and tradition. Behind the scenes, they grieved, longed for connection, and sometimes turned to the unknown in search of comfort. Perhaps this explains why Prince Harry, raised in such an environment, didn't find reaching out to a medium strange. In doing so, he wasn't just acting out of personal grief. He was following a family tradition. But what exactly did he hear during that séance? What message from Diana made him believe she was truly still by his side? By the way, speaking of health and resilience, I also try to keep track of how I'm doing, especially during stressful times. That's why I use an app called Heartscape. It works as a heart rate monitor and stress tracker. I simply place my finger over the iPhone camera, and within seconds it measures my pulse and shows detailed health patterns, including energy, stress level, and daily readiness. It also indicates health patterns over time, helping me see what's improving and what needs attention. You can download Heartscape now from the App Store. Just follow the link under this video. Harry followed in his mother's footsteps. Just like Princess Diana had once done during the most challenging times of her life, he turned to the mystical world for answers. He was drawn to spiritualism, to the idea of connecting with something beyond. And at one point he made a bold move. He met with a woman who, as he writes in Spare, claimed to have powers. She said she could reach out to the dead. For Harry, this wasn't just grief, it was hope. He hopes to hear something from his mother, whom he has lost. In Spare, he describes how the woman told him his mother was with him. "Your mother is with you," she said. These words shook him deeply. He writes that his neck grew warm and his eyes filled with tears. It was so unexpected and emotional. As he puts it, he desperately wanted to believe. Then the medium said something even more striking. You're living the life she wanted for you." That sentence broke something open inside him. He had always felt guilty that he got to live while she did not. And now someone was telling him, supposedly through Diana, that this was precisely the life she had wished him. She went on, "She knows you're looking for clarity. She feels your confusion. She knows you have so many questions." Harry writes that these words felt incredibly accurate. He truly was lost. He had spent years trying to understand who he was and how to live without the one person who had always made him feel seen and loved. One of the most surreal moments came when the medium brought up Christmas. She suddenly asked Harry if anything unusual had happened with the Christmas ornament shaped like the Queen. Harry admitted that his young son Archie had broken just such an ornament and had tried to fix it. The woman smiled and said, "Diana laughed about it." Harry was stunned. How could she have known? But once again he wanted to believe that his mother was still watching over him and his little family. That wasn't the only time Harry felt Diana's presence. In one passage from Spare, he describes a trip to Botswana with his brother William. There, Harry came face to face with a leopard. The animal just stood there, staring at him. He was terrified. "I thought I was going to be eaten alive," he wrote. But then another thought crept in. This wasn't just a wild animal, it was a sign, a message from his mother. He felt the leopard was a messenger sent by his mother to reassure him that everything will be fine. These mystical episodes were interwoven with real-life actions. Harry writes that he drove through the tunnel in Paris, the very one where Diana died, multiple times. He sat in a car and retraced the exact route, hoping to understand what had happened. But even that didn't bring closure. He also admits that in the immediate aftermath of the crash, he truly believed his mother might have faked her death to escape the spotlight. It didn't seem impossible to him, not when the official story felt so incomplete, far from what he felt inside. Years later, now a father himself, Harry still seeks connection. He admits he keeps talking to his mother, even through mediums. And those mysterious words from the other side, they've helped him understand himself just a little better, and maybe even forgive the world for taking her away. Decades have passed since Princess Diana's death, but her influence on Harry has not faded. In fact, it has become something deeply spiritual. Royal biographer Andrew Morton, the author of one of the most famous books about Diana, revealed in the Pod Save the Queen podcast. "I think that Diana's influence has lasted longer than anybody thought because her torchbearers in life, William and Harry, have not forgotten her and have held concerts in her memory." But Morton also made a more astonishing point. Diana's presence is not just symbolic for Harry. Harry himself says that he never makes a decision without referring it to her in a spiritual sense. That confession reveals a lot. For Harry, Diana is not just a memory but a guiding voice. Even after all these years, he still seeks her approval, as if he's silently asking, "Mom, what would you do?" When we look at the most dramatic turns in Harry's life, it becomes easier to understand what Morton meant. For example, the couple's decision to step back from royal duties, a move that shook the monarchy. According to Morton, Harry and Meghan had already begun planning their departure in 2018, just 6 months after their wedding. At that time, Harry was reportedly having private conversations with Oprah Winfrey in a London hotel, discussing their future away from the royal spotlight. It's easy to imagine Harry reflecting on what his mother would advise. Would she have told him to choose freedom over duty, to live the life she couldn't live herself? He often speaks as if her voice is still guiding him silently. Morton pointed out the irony of their departure. Harry had been given an essential role as youth ambassador to the Commonwealth, a symbolic gesture from the Queen handing him a global platform. But perhaps Harry felt this wasn't truly his path. Maybe he sensed deep inside that his mission lay elsewhere, and possibly he was seeking Diana's blessing for the bold move he was about to make. Beyond the significant decisions, Harry's actions in daily life also reflect his mother's legacy. His advocacy for veterans, openness about mental health, warmth, and vulnerability all mirror Diana's famously compassionate spirit. She broke royal traditions by hugging children, sitting on the floor with AIDS patients, and crying with grieving mothers. Now Harry continues that work in his own way, humanizing the monarchy. And maybe that's the real message he keeps hearing from her, the message that lives in every step he takes. Be real, be kind, be brave. Prince Harry lost his mother at the age of 12, and it seems he never truly let go of that pain. Today, he says he doesn't make a single important decision without first consulting her, even if it's through a medium. He feels her presence, support, and voice, even decades later. But that raises the question, do you believe it? Do you believe Princess Diana is sending messages to her son from the other side, or is Harry simply unable to recover from the grief and clinging to comforting illusions that help him keep going? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Remember to like it if you found it interesting. See you in the next story.